we tend to do a little bit of this fifth and wine at the beginning because we're poor and beer makers are all rich, and so we need a little time to advertise for ourselves. So we ran the Cubano this week sandwich, and it was a hit, and we ran out today. You guys, we did like seriously 27 more today, and so we almost don't have enough smoked pork for our Texas style eggs Benedict tomorrow. That's how sad it was today that we were overrun by you guys, and thank you for that, I guess. Now I have to come up with a new special for next week. I don't know. Maybe you guys could all send me, Bob Sobolik and Beth are on this thing, I think tonight. Usually they are. He's a really good cook. So maybe send me ideas of what you think our specials should be for next week for lunch. So, that'd be fun. And I get to decide. You guys aren't in charge, but we'll have fun with that. We got new wine tasting next week, and we got some superstars. We've got, like I said last night, we've got kind of a legend in the wine world's daughter. We've got Javier, and I'm going to learn how to say Javier instead of Javier. That'll be good for me. And he's going to stay up till 2:30 in the morning in Spain and talk to us. And only a Spaniard could stay up till 2:30 and still be okay talking. I certainly couldn't. What else we got? Oh, we got a guy, Sam Elliott. I think I told you guys last night is going to be on. Basically, it's Sam Elliott.
As far as you know.
As far as you guys know, right? Anyway. And then what else do we have? Oh, I won the argument with Heather. She and I were arguing. It was a big fight, really, and I won, which I think that's good because I'm the customer. So Heather works at Eagle, and she finally gave in to my insistence on having Herman's story from Paso Robles. You guys met his wife with Desperada a couple weeks ago if you were on this tasting. So we got her and him. I don't know. We got one other person that's really fun too. We've got seriously a superstar lineup. We're charging 135, I think, right? 135. And these wines would normally be about 185. And so we're taking the hit to the bottom line just to make you guys happy. So one last week of wine tasting. And I think if you saw my email today, we seriously we taste a lot of wine. I'm sure the beer people taste a lot of beer. But this is even a lot for us. So, we need to have a liver break for a little bit. So next week is our last week of that. It's not like a furniture store that says they're going out of business for like 8 months. We actually are not going to do that for a while. And but people are contacting us still about this. Like it's been received well. I hope to do one a week. It's kind of my goal. And then tonight, it was really fun. Tonight we did, there's a guy in Big Sky. His name is Chef Ming Tsai, Tsai. And he did a cooking show along with a sommelier from Yellowstone Club. And it was so fun to watch. And it was a little bit disconnected because they let we mute all you people because otherwise you'd interrupt us and that wouldn't be, we couldn't dominate the conversation. But it was a little odd that way, but man, did we learn a lot. Like he put asparagus in with his pappardelle pasta in the water to flavor it up. And he taught us how to cut asparagus at the right length so that it would cook evenly. And it was just really fun. So Tara and I are working hard on getting Nick Memke. You guys know him he used to cook at the Grand Union in Fort Bend, and his good friend, he and Tara were good friends in high school, and we're working on getting him to do the same kind of thing. So we'll still do some of these, but I just think, maybe not every night. I don't know. I'm probably still going to drink every night, but you guys need a break. What else we got? Oh, here's what we got. The beer people are so much more fun than the wine people. It's crazy. Like they're partiers. And you know what else they do is they give us swag all the time. Like I got a shirt for free today from these guys. So we get nothing from wine people. So I don't know. We're thinking about one more change to our name and just go permanently fifth in beer. Beer sells great anyway in Great Falls. So maybe we went from Wines by Wednesday to Fifth in Wine, and I just head on to Fifth and Beer. What the hell? Tomorrow we have brunch, and we have, because you guys ordered so many damn Cubanos, we only have 8 orders left of the Texas style eggs Benedict. So make sure if you want that, you get that in early. And we have, I don't know, whatever. We have fun stuff, and I think that's it now. I think I'm done. So we have Max on tonight. Max is the owner of Lewis and Clark. So my first question, Max, is how'd you come up with the name Lewis and Clark? I mean, is that like the first owners or something, or where did that come from?
Originally, we're one of the old people in the beer business. We've been doing this coming up on 20 years. So I bought an old brewery called the Sleeping Giant Brewing Company that had started in 96. It was one of the first breweries opened in Montana, and it was underneath a restaurant called the Brew House here in Helena. And they were just about filing for bankruptcy when I bought them. So I didn't buy their entity. I just bought all the equipment and thought, well, I'll call my company Sleeping Giant Beverage Company Incorporated and try to see what I can do to run this brewery. And then they filed for bankruptcy. And all of a sudden I would make an order in to get raw materials like malt, barley, or hops. And we came up on the bad boy list of, wait a minute, you guys are bankrupt. And no, it's not me, it's a different company. And so I realized I needed to come up with a better solution, because outside of Helena, people didn't know what the Sleeping Giant mountain range was. And the word sleeping and beer are not necessarily the best pairings. And so I decided, hey, we're in the only Lewis and Clark County in the entire United States, and we are in the county seat. So it seems like we should have the right to call ourselves the county brewery. So I just said, wow, is Lewis and Clark Brewing Company available? And it was, and that's the rest is history. That was only 2 years after we started. So it was about 2004. So about 16 years ago, we changed the name to Lewis and Clark.
It's crazy that you guys got, I mean, to me, that is like, my wife is obviously the distributor with Anheuser-Busch and
Sure.
people. And so it's crazy, like you put Lewis and Clark up in Glacier Park, or, you put it around the state. Like how you guys got that name is just amazing to me.
St. Louis. I mean, it's outside of Montana too.
Yeah, it is true. I've had a lot of people ask me over the years, and we did have one legal issue that we had to work our way through, because there was a company, ironically, from Helena originally that had Lewis and Clark vodka. And so because we were registered under a different class by the TTB, distilled spirits is different than beer and wine are categorized together, that we were okay. But we did start having some issues. And so just actually within the last year, we sat down, hammered out an agreement, and we're never going to do distilled spirits, and they're never going to do beer. And we'll be able to keep each other happy and forever be at peace, hopefully. So, but yeah, it's a challenge. I think coming up with beer names right now is one of the toughest things when you got 7,000 breweries, and on average, they all make 10 to 15 beers. That's 70 to 100,000 beer names out there, and people are starting to step all over each other. And the unfortunate thing is you have to police your marks, or if you don't, they can be in jeopardy in the future. So we're usually really cool about it. We certainly had a Miners Gold not long ago down in, it was in Northern California, and got a hold of the brewery and said, hey, what's your plans? Oh, we just made it for one time. I said, all right, well, just let it run out, and please don't package it, and please don't, because we own that trademark. So you gotta be careful, and it makes you be a little more creative nowadays.
How'd you get started in the beer market or the beer world?
I was in real estate years ago, and I started working for a company called Realtor.com that had all the homes for sale on the internet. And I was traveling all over the country, and then, we had 9/11 occur, and all of a sudden all the .com bubble burst, and I thought for sure that job was going to go away. I didn't want to move to Southern California. I was born and raised here in Montana, and I had 3 little kids now, and I said, wow, I got to buy myself a job. And I couldn't get back into real estate because I had signed a non-compete clause when I sold my real estate business. And the brewery was available. I actually found out about it, ironically, at a poker game one night. And someone said, hey, that place, I had a growler of the Sleeping Giant beer. And they said, hey, that place is going bankrupt. I bet you could get a pretty good deal on it. So I looked at it, went into the bank, and he said, hey, look me in the eye, shake my hand, and promise me you'll pay me back and you can have it. So that's how it all started.
I heard
I was a
your.
home brewer at the time, but
Oh, you were, yeah. I was wondering.
it was a big step. Just it was scary.
Yeah, buying a bankrupt business can't be.
Yeah.
Can't
Yeah,
be.
you. The only thing I did is I looked in the office and there was 4 desks, and the spots on the carpet were worn out where the chairs were, and I thought, I don't know, looks like that might have been part of the problem. Too many chiefs and not enough Indians,
So, so tell us about kind of the growth. You're one of the bigger ones now.
Yeah, we're starting to get there. We've been really fortunate. We've got a great team of not only brewers, but with Dania on board, it's just amazing what she's been able to do over the last couple of years to give our brand more exposure, not only in Montana, but in all the states that we cover now, which are, we're in Idaho and Washington and Wyoming and North Dakota, and moved into Las Vegas, Nevada. And so it's been crazy in a good way. We moved to a new facility in 2011 and then did this major expansion just a couple of years ago. About a $9 million expansion, got a big, deep hole to climb out of now, which really motivates you to get out there and get stuff sold. But, we're really blessed because of the dedication of the team that I have and the amount of awards that we've been winning with the Small Brewery of the Year and the beers themselves winning just award after award. The Miners Gold is just ridiculous. The amount of gold medals it's won in succession has just never happened before. And so that's really opened a lot of doors for us as well. And so it's been a blessing for sure. So now we can go up to about 40, 50,000 barrels someday. I don't know if we'll ever get there. We're hovering around 12,000 now, and we're growing. We were growing before all this happened. We were growing at about 15% a year. But I'm encouraged. The new seltzers that we have launched have been screaming. We can't make enough of them right now, and that's a good thing. We also are the first ones to kind of look around and say, hey, how can we use a Montana product? So we're actually using Montana sugar for Montana sugar beets. That's our fermentable product that we use. And then we're also using real fruit juice, which Mike is my master of seltzers, and he's just the master of coming up with new cool stuff when I give him a challenge, and he can give you more information how that works. But most people that make a seltzer just kind of squirt some flavoring in at the end, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just the fact. It's like an essence they're putting in, whereas this is a little more difficult because we're actually putting real fruit juice in and allowing it to ferment out to get all the carbs and the calories down and all that good stuff. And they actually have some color.
I'm pretty familiar with the rating system in wine, obviously, Wine Advocate and Robert Parker and all that. But what is the story on the beer world? Is there the same kind? Is there one dominant figure that rates beers, or how does that work?
There's several competitions. The most respectable competitions out there are the World Beer Cup, which happens every 2 years. It's a bummer. We would have just been at the World Beer Cup at the Craft Brewers Conference. It got canceled. So we have won the gold medal in 2018 for the Miners Gold, and I don't know whether they're going to push that and have one on 2021 or wait until 2022. But then every year there's something called a Great American Beer Festival in Denver, and we've been very fortunate to win medals down there as well. And these competitions have like 8,000 beers entered. So to win a medal in these is getting to be more and more difficult, and we just feel incredibly fortunate that we've been able to repeat as many times as we have. And it really goes to the credit of the brewing team and the attention to detail and the concern over things like oxygen and making sure that we're doing everything we can to keep the quality of the product up there as high as possible. And now we're just made a commitment today to buy a CO2 recapture system where we create CO2 during fermentation. Now we're going to capture that, we're going to purify it and use it. And instead of just letting it go into the atmosphere, which obviously has some great environmental positives about it too, but it's the quality of the beer that's going to be better because the CO2 itself is that much more pure.
Nice. So I've been to your brewery, your new one. I think you're down by the tracks, right, in Helena?
Yep.
That's
right down by the railroad tracks
Mm-hmm.
on Montana Avenue. And another exciting announcement is just to the east of us. It was kind of hard to see us from Montana Avenue, but we're purchasing the piece of property between us and Montana where all the storage sheds are. We're going to clean that all out, create some more parking and a new front entrance, be a lot easier to describe where we're at to say Montana Avenue and the railroad track. So we're real excited about that. I hate to take up all your time because you got Mike and Dania, and they know a lot more about everything than I do, but I really appreciate the opportunity to say hi to you guys. I can't wait to come up and check out your place. I've heard a lot about it. I love old buildings. We're in an old building, as you know, and I heard yours is like an old fab shop or steel shop or something like that.
Shop, right.
I definitely want to come up and check it out. I love that kind of stuff. So I'll make sure I reach out to you when we get over this stuff and get up and enjoy a glass of wine or whatever you have to offer.
No, we'll have some of your beer on tap too if you want.
Okay.
But sometimes we always ask people one last question. I'll let you go.
Yeah.
So when you're making beer, or you're done with beer or seltzer, what do you drink? Whiskey?
You know, I've been on, I do drink quite a bit of whiskey and vodka, but I've been on ketosis for about coming up on a year and a half now on the keto diet. And so I really have to watch my carbs, and that's why I'm drinking seltzer. I drink seltzer or vodka or whiskey, and that keeps me down. I miss the beer, and I drink about a juicy IPA, which is our lowest carb beer that we make. I drink one of those usually every day, and it means so much more to me now because I miss it so much. And then every once in a while, I just go off and just go on a drinking binge for 3 days or something. But I also enjoy wine as well. I'm kind of a sweet wine guy, so I like Moscatos and Prosecco and maybe the chick wines. I've got a sweet tooth, so I love that kind of stuff.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Max. It was wonderful to have you join in.
Thanks, Max.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Take care. Cheers.
All right. I guess
All
you're
right.
up.
Hey, guys.
I guess you're up, Brooke.
Let's drink some beer. So the first one I'm pouring is the Yellowstone. I don't know if you guys are already started. And I have myself a nice little tulip glass,
Oh,
an
nice.
etched logo on the front. I should have sent you some.
No, you did fine.
Thanks. You guys look great in the shirts, by the way. So a little history about myself. I started at my first microbrewery in the state of Montana in 2005. I worked at the Blackfoot River Brewing Company for 12 years. During that time, I went back to school for accounting and landed an internship with McDantum, which is a company that manufactures blenders that mix CO2 and nitrogen to create beer gas to have beer on tap. So during that time, I fueled my love for craft beer, learned how to work a brew fest, which I do now for Lewis and Clark. And then I took about a year off, and one day I was on the river and was out there all day, had a couple of beers, caught lots of trout. And I walked into the Lewis and Clark Brewing Company, and Max was in there, and he waved at me. So, of course, I turned around to see who he was waving at, and he was waving at me. So he came up to me and asked me if I would start selling his beer. So next month will be 3 years that I've been at Lewis and Clark, and it's awesome.
Nice.
Nice.
He seems like a kind of a character. He must be, huh?
He's great. Yeah.
Right.
Really good dude.
Right. And I think successful business-wise, you guys have been growing for, like you said, 15% a year. It's amazing. I think we're kind of on the same, Tara and I kind of on the same track with that. So just to speak as a business person, I think that's amazing that you guys, as big as you are, you keep growing. And
we've been very fortunate. Currently, our distribution area is all of Montana, all of Idaho, a portion of North Dakota, a portion of Wyoming, Washington to the Tri-Cities from here. And then we recently opened the Vegas market.
Crazy. So we talked a little bit today about kind of the history of the brewery, and Max just went through that. But what about who's the brewmaster, and how many brewers do you have, and kind of maybe, I don't know who wants to answer that, but kind of what happened there? How many people do you have working for you that make beer?
We have a pretty great team in the back. Mike, that's on tonight, is our lead brewer. Our head brewer is Sean Tobin, and he might join later. But Mike, how many people are back there?
I've got 6 guys in the back that are just do production stuff, and some guys kind of float, but we got a 3-man packaging team and 3 brewers and myself. So I kind of do lately mostly innovation and quality control stuff. So I've kind of been a little bit more detached from the day-to-day production stuff and more involved in mostly seltzers here recently, but new beers specifically, and also ensuring that we maintain the quality that people have come to expect from us.
So your flagship beer is what? Is it the Miner's Gold?
Depends on what day it is. It kind of flops between Miner's Gold and Prickly Pear. Miners is really draft heavy. We've got a lot of handles all over Montana. Daniel could probably speak more informedly about those percentages, but Miners has taken a bit of a hit with all this COVID stuff just because it is so draft heavy. But Prickly is right there with it. Those
Where's that accent from?
Western North Carolina. I see Amanda over there too. She's my brethren from Appalachia.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I grew up in Western North Carolina, and I've been in the industry almost 10 years now, but worked in Portland, Oregon for 7 years and got tired of big city living and decided to move my family out here almost 2 years ago.
were you in the brewing business in Portland too?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
did you work for?
I worked for a couple of small breweries that were actually over across the river in Vancouver, 5440 most recently, and then Heathen Brewing before that. Both were startups when I worked for them. So
Cool.
living in Portland was really good for my career. It was just a lot more city than I wanted when I, decided to start a family.
You seem like a city guy. That's weird. So I guess, is it time to talk about the beers, you guys? Or
I think so.
Yeah.
Sorry, Danny, I didn't mean to hijack you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. So we started with the Yellowstone Golden Ale. We were very fortunate with, we winning an award for this beer. We got the silver medal at the NABA, the North American Brewers Association Awards, in 2019. So it's called Yellowstone beer. We do sell it all over Yellowstone National Park. We also have rebranded it for Glacier National Park. So it is statewide and we do fairly well with it. It's around 5.2% with IBUs at 12. Mike, do you have to add anything to add to?
Well, yeah, we got to talk about IBU, for instance. We haven't talked about IBU yet, or even what that means.
So it's
How much time you got?
the international.
I personally have like a long time, but we try to keep it fairly short.
It's the international bittering unit. So kind of like how hoppy the beer is.
Yeah. So IBUs are a bit deceptive to a beer drinker. I think they're more useful to a brewer. And the reason that they're deceptive, and I have a 55-minute long PowerPoint presentation on this subject specifically, so I'll try to distill it down to just a few minutes here. But speaking scientifically, 1 IBU is 1 gram of isomerized alpha acid, and it's basically an easy way to measure bitterness. The problem with measuring bitterness in quantitative terms is that it's super subjective, and there's a lot of individual perceptions that change things. So for instance, like a hazy IPA can taste incredibly hoppy and juicy and citrusy and floral and all these adjectives that we use to describe hoppy beers, but have a very low bitterness. And by the same token, an imperial stout that's 11% ABV can be 90 IBUs but not taste bitter at all because it has that big chocolatey malt backbone. So there's a lot of factors. It's tough to just look at one number and say, well, this beer is really bitter or this beer is not very bitter at all, because there is a lot of things that influence perceived bitterness other than just the lab analysis of isomerized alpha acid, if that makes sense. Hopefully I didn't confuse you guys, but.
Well, say that word again, the
isomerized alpha acids.
Yeah.
So
I think you
basically,
confused us.
an alpha acid is a compound that occurs in the hops, and with the addition of heat, you isomerize those. So when you boil the hops, they become isomerized and measurable as IBUs.
Nice. That's fun. And then maybe we could talk about the taste and the aromas and the texture of this beer.
Yeah, for sure. So this beer is kind of designed to be our quote unquote river slammer. It's one of the lightest beers that we make, but it's also super complex. You know, if you look at it, it's very light in color, and generally people associate light colored beers with beers that are also fairly simple and lack complexity. But that's not the case with this one. It's if you look at the recipe in terms of the malts that we use in it, it's the busiest grist of any beer that we make. So it's got a bunch of different light colored malts in it, and it just lends a complexity that's very, very uncommon in a beer of its gravity range and and color. To be frank, you don't see too many pale beers that have that level. There's so much going on in that grist, and then we hop it delicately with Citra, which is kind of a sexy hop right now. It's stupid expensive and hard to get, to the point it frustrates me almost on a daily basis. But
Hey, I wonder if you could just be a little bit more honest in this conversation. It feels like you're kind of just beating around the bush.
But yeah, so the Citra is known for its super punchy dankness. Most people wouldn't use it in a golden ale, and I'm one of those people. This is one of those beers that Sean developed before I came along, and when I saw the recipe, I was like, why in the hell are we using Citra in a golden ale? And but it works. It works really well. And there's just enough those kind of really, when I sniff this beer and when I really get my nose in it, what I get from it is like slightly overripe peach, and but it's subtle. It's not like sniffing peach knee high. It's definitely more along the lines of a apricot, kind of super pithy stone fruit. And but it's also a beer that you can drink all day long. I mean, all day long. Trust me, I've done it.
Nice.
But there's a lot of complexity there, and that's something that we go for. Sometimes less is more, but to differentiate ourselves from every other, light colored 4 or 5.2% beer out there, we gave this beer a lot. And it's got wheat in it. It's got Munich malt, a bunch of different color malts that don't really contribute a whole lot of color, but it's got some biscuit notes. It's got some caramel on the, in the malt profile. And just a really, really solid everyday drinking beer. So
Nice. I like it.
you got anything to add, Danielle?
No, I think you totally beer nerded out. That was perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can really get going. So let me know if I'm taking up too much time.
No, you're perfect. We love it. We have a question before the next beer from Dugan. Is it harder to introduce a new beer when you're a bigger brewery, or is that expected?
It absolutely is. Especially with distribution, the problem you run into is.
Be careful. Kathy's on the phone.
Well, no, this is nothing negative against distributors, but we only have so much shelf space, right? And if we're going to introduce a beer, and specifically in our chain placements, the question that we have to ask is this going to add to our total sales, or is it going to completely cannibalize one of our existing brands? And we have internal discussions about this all the time, and you can't just continuously add new products and expect your old show horses to perform as well, because people are fickle at the end of the day, and I mean that in the most positive way possible. People love to try new things, but they also love their old favorites, and it's a balancing act between, do I just hit folks with 2 new seasonals every quarter, or do we just continue to ride with our old ride or dies that have been good to us for so many years? And believe me, I wish I had a better answer for that, because it's an extremely difficult question.
We had the Elysian people on Tuesday, I guess it was. I don't know. I've lost track of time because I drink every night. And so they talked about the same thing. Like, what's their big big
Well, space dust is one
Space
of
Space
the,
dust.
dust and
Right.
pumpkin,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we heard from people that like, wow, I used to love space dust. I hadn't tasted that in years. And so I think that's going on in the beer world. It's like
Mhm.
everybody's looking for the next new thing, right? Feels like.
Yep. Yep. And it's been that way for at least the past 6 or 8 years, and there's less loyalty towards, the flagship is kind of a moving target, because what is a flagship right now may not be in 2 years,
Right.
Mhm.
All right. Should we move on to the next beer?
Sure.
So we've got the Weizenbach up next. This is a German style. It's a big, dark wheat beer,
It's good.
kind of sweet. It is one of the stronger beers that we can, so it's 8%.
Mm.
Got a really nice color to it. It's pretty dark on the screen. The IBUs are at 40. And like I said, it is 8%, and it's got Cascade hops in it. What do you guys
And
think?
if I could interrupt you, here's a perfect example to, if we could throw back to your question about IBUs. This beer actually has more IBUs than Juicy Obsession, which is the session IPA that we're going to taste next, but it tastes way less hoppy. So we can get into that discussion in a minute if you want to revisit that, but it's a function of the bigger, maltier, boozier kind of framework of the beer. And this is just a perfect example of that. I wish we didn't even have to talk about IBU, because it's more useful for brewers that are putting together recipes than it is for the drinker. If I was to walk into a bar or a bottle shop, that'd be the last thing I was concerned about.
So yeah, keep going on.
Keep going on that.
Yeah, on the IBU thing.
Okay, so
You seem passionate about it.
I am, just because it's very widely misunderstood. And I've spent a great deal of time trying to get our bar staff in the tap room to understand it, but it's a tough thing to understand because they're not brewers. So when I say it's more useful for brewers than it is for drinkers, so to break things down very simply, we boil our beer for 60 to 90 minutes, and that's when we're adding the hops. And the longer the hops boil, the more alpha acids are isomerized, or the more bitterness you get from it. The later in that time period they're added, the more aromatics, because if you just boil the piss out of them, all the aromatics get boiled off and stripped out. So the later you add them, the more.
Hold on, I gotta stop you for a minute.
You are so funny.
Only somebody from, where'd you say you were from, would say boil the piss out of it. That's funny. So keep going. I love it. That's entertaining.
The later in the boil you add the hops, the more fragrance you maintain. And dry hopping is another technique that gets talked about a lot, but dry hopping is actually kind of a misnomer too. It should be called cold hopping, because the only difference between dry hopping and kettle hopping is the absence of heat in a dry hop. So you're adding hops to cellar temperature beer rather than 206 degree beer, which just so happens to be where we boil at here in Helena, is 206 degrees. So in the total absence of heat, like with dry hopping, all you get is fragrance and aromatics, and you get some humulinones and some pretty complex hop compounds there too. And you can get some bitterness, but they're not measurable as isomerized alpha acid. So you do get some bitterness from dry hops, but they don't show up in the traditional ISO lab tests. So it's a bullshit number as far as I'm concerned.
So I thought 212 was boiling point, but apparently it's based on elevation.
Yeah, elevation changes it significantly. Here in Helena, I'm not real sure what elevation the brewery's at, probably 34, maybe, Dania?
I know what the pass is at, so that could be
I know
right.
we boil at
Yeah.
206.
I know that for sure. Oh, this is fun.
What did you guys
talk about
think
the
of the
beer?
Big Bell? Did you get a chance to try it, Mark?
Oh, I haven't talked about the beer, that beer actually, really. I can talk about it too if you'd rather me get off my soapbox and stuff.
Yes, if you want to talk about the beer and stay on your soapbox, that's fine.
Okay, so this beer, it's a Weizenbach is a German style that's wheat heavy. So this beer's got 30% wheat in the grist. It also has some chocolate malt, some roasted barley, and it's got, we mash it really, really hot so that we get a bunch of residual sugars left over. But sometimes what you find in this style is those banana clove esters that you would get, say, from a German style Hefeweizen. I'm sorry, Weizenbach. You notice that those are absent in this beer, and there's some esters from fermentation, but they're not nearly as over the top as what you'd get in it. And classic German example of the style. That's largely for two reasons. One, because we don't want them in there, and two, because we ferment it with an English yeast strain, just like we ferment everything else. So is this beer, it's our interpretation of a Weizenbach. It's not the most stylistically accurate, but as craft brewers, that's something that we've the style guidelines at this point are more of a suggestion than the rule of law.
So we have a
you'll
question.
also notice that our Miner's Gold is also a Hefeweizen, and it also doesn't have those over-the-top banana clovey esters that are benchmark of the style most of the time.
We have a question. People wants to know what's grist. Is that like must in the wine world, do you think?
Yeah, it's basically so a grain bill is the different varieties of malt that we use to make up the grist. And the only difference between the grist and the grain bill is that the grist is crushed.
Cool.
And so we run it through a 3-roller mill. It's not anywhere near as fine as flour because, as we all know, if you add water to flour, you get dough. And it's not what we want. I want that big mass of malt to stay fluid so that fluid can move through it at a very even rate. So I'm a crush chaser too. I don't really want to dive down that rabbit hole, but there's a happy medium between too coarse, because if you're too coarse, you're not getting the maximum extraction out of that malt. But if you're too fine, you got lautering issues and you're backing up.
So talk about this beer, will you?
Okay, yeah, sorry.
You don't have to be sorry. It's fine. We're enjoying
So we
it.
ferment it with our house strain, which is an English ale strain. And we shoot for right at 8%. And basically what we're looking for here is this is the beer for Lewis and Clark Brewing that fits that winter warmer kind of big, boozy, chocolatey kind of dessert beer. It's got a lot of residual sweetness. It's got, if you really get your nose in it, I've heard people say toffee. I've heard people say chocolate. I've heard people say, roasted nuts. There's all kinds of stuff going on in the nose of this beer. And my favorite, and I don't drink a whole lot of it just because I drink a lot and I can't drink a lot of Big Belt because it just is early bedtime if I do. But I really like that chocolately kind of toasted almond thing that's on the nose, and it just goes down. It's a dessert beer for me. I only drink one or two, but we get people in the tap room that buy it by the case. It blows my mind.
All right. So let me see what else we have some fun things. So you need to be on next, I think it's Wednesday, for the wine tasting from a guy in Spain that's staying out till 2:30 in the morning, because we think you two would be fast friends.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll send you the bottle for free.
Every hillbilly needs a good Spaniard friend. So
I'll make sure what time it is. I mean what day it is. I think it's Wednesday, but I can't remember. Anyway, what do we have? One more beer left? You got anything else you want to talk about? Any other soapboxes?
Not for the moment. I'm sure I'll come up with something though.
Well, the next one's an IPA, so I'd like to hear about India Pale Ale. Maybe you guys could tell the story about where that came from and kind of the history of just IPAs in general before we talk about yours in particular.
Okay. So in the sun never sets on the British Empire. I'm not a history guy, but if we're going back to those days, the beer that the British used to export to India, it was a long trip. They were sending it in wood casks on wood boats. It took hell and forever to get it there. So they needed to preserve it a little bit better than they were doing for their pub, because the British business model for breweries is largely pub driven. So I'd hate to throw out a percentage, but a staggering percentage of beer made in Great Britain gets sold straight across the bar. So they're used to really fresh beer, but when those brewers started send beer to their imperial territories like India, they needed it to survive the journey. So hops are a natural preservative. They're closely related to cannabis. Just a fun fact. I don't know if that has anything to do with its qualities as a preservative, but they started adding more hops to beer so that it could survive the journey. And also in wood casks, wood is a porous surface. It's basically a giant petri dish for beer spoiling organisms. I mean, I can't think of a more ideal container to put bad beer in, And now we're doing it on purpose with sours and wild beers, but back then they wanted it to get there as clean as they could. And so an English IPA by American standards is nothing like I'm pretty sure that the British would call a contemporary American IPA a complete bastardization of what they had in mind when they just upped the hops just a little bit, and they got a little bit more bitterness out of it as just a byproduct of
What do you think the IBU of that would have been?
I don't give a damn, really. It's not a good answer. But and even
It's killing it.
recently, we still make an English style IPA, but it's more bitter on the back end. It's more malt focused. There's a lot of dark crystal malts in it, and it's not completely, the hops aren't the focal point of that beer. And that's the way it was with the English IPAs until very recently, until they started trying to copy the Americans and figured out that we were all onto something over here with our IPAs and our ridiculous copious hop usage. So, yeah, that's a little bit of the background. And there are people that say that account is it's arguable that that's why the British started doing it, but that's the most widely accepted theory.
So in the wine world, we had Madeira, which is the same
Yeah.
thing. They put it in the top of the ships and took it over the equator, and it kind of pretty much cooked inside the barrels. And so then everybody celebrates it like it was some, genius move, and it really was. They tried to take wine and it cooked, and then everybody liked it. So I think.
Yeah, I mean,
don't know if
sometimes
that's
you got to
true.
make chicken salad out of chicken shit, right?
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking. So do you want to talk about, so we're doing the IPA now, all of us, I think, right? You want to talk about that?
Sure can. Daniel, do you want to start off, or you want me to just keep
Yeah,
going?
sure. So the Juicy Obsession IPA, it's one of our newest flagships. It's super crushable. So it's lower octane, lower ABV. We capitalize the S in session to remind people that it is lower alcohol. It's got the Mosaic and the Citra hops. It's becoming one of my personal favorites. Check it
Yeah,
out.
I would say it's not just one of your personal favorites. It's rapidly becoming it's our third best-selling brand in the tap room right now, or at least it was before we had to close the tap room. And I think once we get it in front of more people across our distribution footprint, it's going to be nipping on the heels of Miners and Prickly. And I don't see this beer. We brewed it as a seasonal, and Max liked it so much. He was like, man, we got to get this in a can and get it in the seasonal rotation. And then it did so well in the seasonal rotation. He was like, man, we got to get this in the year-round flagship, lineup. So we brewed it first. We actually didn't use Mosaic in it in the first pilot batch because I burned out on Mosaic, or was at the time, because, Mosaic's been the it hop for probably 3 years now, and it's great hop.
Yeah, we all know that. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody knows that Mosaic has been the hot one. Thanks for
Yeah.
just saying
Well,
the obvious.
But sometimes some lots, depending on what field it comes from, because hops have a terroir just like wine grapes.
Hold on, wait. You just made me $1.
Oh,
I had a bet with a guy that said I wouldn't get terroir in the conversation tonight.
well.
So thank you. Keep going. Sorry.
Hey, all right. So hops have a terroir just like wine grapes, and different fields, different climate, they have an effect on that. I mean, it's a plant just like a grape. And some lots of mosaic hops can have a really garlicky kind of green onion. We call it allium, which I think is like the vampire slayer slang term for garlic. But it can be really off-putting in some lots. But when you get a really good lot that's had a good year and it's been grown in good soil by people that really know how to grow hops, it's freaking amazing. I mean, it's super, again, it's peach, apricot, super, super potent, dank. I mean, it reminds you of sticking your nose in a real dank sack of green bud. So we selected Mosaic because we had a bunch of it, and that's another thing that most people don't understand about the way the hop market works. Is I can't get whatever hops I want. I can try. I mean, I don't want to say a black market, but we buy and sell and trade, but hops are mostly exchanged on futures, and I have to contract years in advance. So it's really, for one, difficult to know how much beer I'm going to be brewing in the year 2025, much less what people are going to want. So what we wind up with is severe shortages and severe overages. It just seems to be the nature of the beast. And this particular variety we had a lot of, and we were actually going to sell it because it's really good trading fodder for other things because everybody wants it right now. And I was like, well, we'll do the second test batch with Mosaic since we got a metric shitload of it. And it came out really good. And we actually went back to Yakima last fall to select for the upcoming crop years to make sure that we had lots that didn't have that super skunky ass garlicky character that I don't care for. But if you can keep that out of your Mosaic, it's a phenomenal hop. And paired with Citra, they just kind of complement each other. And we wanted to, so the other difficult thing with a session IPA, and we're kind of coming full circle here, getting back to our IBU conversation, it's difficult with a low gravity beer that has a light body to not make it abrasively bitter. They can just come out thin, and it almost doesn't matter what you do. The hops can be overwhelming, and you get punchy bitterness without all that juicy, kind of nectary flavor that coats the tongue, but doesn't just leave you scratch. You know how like a dry white wine can have an astringence that almost feels like it's turning your mouth inside out? You can get the same phenomenon with super over hopped session IPAs, and we wanted to avoid that. And it took us about 3 turns to get it dialed in, but I'm really happy with where this recipe's at right now. And it's very simple on the grist. We added just a little bit of wheat to boost the body just a shade to keep it from getting too thin on the mouthfeel. But other than that, it's pretty much just straight face malt and a ton of hops.
So I think I missed this. I want to make sure I got it. Is it micro shit ton?
Metric, but that works too.
Metric shit ton. All right.
Yeah.
Make sure I got the term right. So session beers. Tell us the story of session and the term, what that means.
To distill, I'm actually not sure where the term originated from, but to distill it down into one simple definition, it's just a low gravity beer. The gravity is how we measure. Gravity doesn't mean alcohol, but they have a very close relationship. So we measure the specific gravity of beer before fermentation and then after. So specific gravity is a measure of density. So as the beer ferments and the yeast metabolize those fermentable sugars, they turn them into ethanol and CO2, the beer gets less dense. So that specific, and all it is just a calibrated float. The lower it floats in the sample.
Is that a middle finger?
It's an index finger.
Okay, thanks.
But so we measure that density and basically the difference in the two. So if it starts way up here at, a specific gravity of 0.051, and then as that becomes less dense, it becomes less dense because that sugar is turning into alcohol. wherever we stop, we take the difference of those two figures, and that's how we figure out the percentage of alcohol by volume. So when that's where the term high gravity comes from. So high gravity doesn't necessarily mean high alcohol. It means the potential to be high alcohol.
Yeah, I heard session beers also means you could drink it as in a session, like you could.
Yeah, I was getting around to that. So sorry, again, I got talking about specific gravity. Just I wasn't really sure.
Look at Hazel.
Session beer, in short, to distill it down, is a low gravity beer that you can drink and drink and drink and drink.
Right.
And that's what we do. I mean, by we, I mean me and my wife. We drink the piss out of it. It is so crushable. You know, and I'd rather have it in my boat than, you know, if I was floating a river, I can drink this all day more than I could PBR, Coors Light, or whatever Anheuser-Busch product. I put it up against any of them in terms of crushability.
Are you a fly fisherman or bait?
I'm mostly a sit in the canoe and drink beer kind of guy. But I'm just the world's poorest angler. It's not that I don't enjoy it. It's just that I'm really bad at it.
All right. I think I might be at the end of questions. Anybody got anything? Maybe one more soapbox?
Do you want to read that one?
Let's see here. Oh, I mean, guess I could talk about the whole hazy IPA craze.
Oh, nice.
And,
Yeah, that'd be great.
which is, you know, I hate to say I'm from the old school because I'm not really, but I was trained by brewers that are from the old school. And when this whole crazy IPA thing kind of came around, I was like, you know what? I've spent half of my adult life and all of my career chasing brilliantly clear beer. And now the fickle mob is telling me that they want hazy beer. I was like, well, I don't know what to do here. So I was slow to come around to the idea of hazy IPAs, and as a result of that, we didn't totally miss the boat, but we kind of were late to the game, and we kind of definitely missed the feeding frenzy. And, you know, the truth is there's a biotransformation that goes on between yeast and hops when you add hops during active fermentation that we really don't understand fully as a brewing community yet. I mean, even the Germans who have I have a child's understanding of fermentation compared to the really high level German brewers and German scholars. And they don't even know what's going on with this relationship between the yeast and the hops in a hazy IPA. So I think it's fascinating on that level that here we are pushing boundaries, and we've kind of, again, by accident, made something phenomenally delicious that people can't get enough of almost entirely by accident, just from being innovative and continually pushing boundaries. And when I say me, I don't mean me. I mean my colleagues in the brewing industry.
What about seltzers? I guess you've done a little thing on that, huh?
Yeah. So when Max asked me to head up the seltzer development at Lewis and Clark, I was like, God, this is not what I signed up for. But I got to thinking about it, and at the end of the day, I hate to sound like a jaded asshole, but I also like money. And if you look at the market data, conservative projections show seltzer growing by 400% in the next 3 years. So when we started development, I was like, well, I don't really necessarily want our seltzers to taste like everything else that's out there right now, which is a super fizzy, almost flavorless, with some sort of fragrance. You know, I was like, I want this to be more like a real fermented, and not to say that the commercially available ones aren't fermented, because they most certainly are, but, you know, they're cheap to brew. They use a very minimal amount of flavoring. They're largely brewed from a parent base, so they make these huge batches of flavorless base, and then they just split them up and add whatever flavoring they need to each, and whatever you got to do. I'm not knocking the way other people do it. What I'm trying to say is that we wanted to be different, and I rather cockily thought that it was going to be easy, and it has not been. It has been the most humbling experience of my career in this industry. The first 2 or 3 batches of seltzer that we made at Lewis and Clark tasted like prison hooch. I mean, they were god awful. And we dumped them straight down the drain. And even we had to rush development. And, you know, people that were expecting White Claw from our seltzers, I think were a little bit disappointed. But we knew that, and we did our best to try to get out in front of that and, you know, inform the public and let people know that they were going to be not only different, but, you know, just have a lot more flavor than people are used to in hard seltzers. And the feedback so far has been resoundingly positive. You know, I've learned a long time ago that you can't please everybody. I don't get on Untapped anymore because it just makes my blood pressure go up. But anyway, that's a whole nother soapbox that you guys probably don't have time for at this point. But
We've got time.
No, we are so busy. Crazy. So one of the questions is, what's your favorite beer? Let's go outside of Lewis and Clark, because I think obviously you can't pick one of those. That's your family.
yeah, man, that's a very difficult question. I really love Hofbrau Helles. It's a German style Helles lager, fairly widely available in the States these days. And it's because it's a lager style. If it's well taken care of and kept cold, it holds up in the package for a very long time. And that's one of my biggest complaints with imported beer is they don't, by the time they get over here, they don't taste like they're supposed to taste. And, you know, that's one thing that we deal with in the beer world that the wine world doesn't have such a problem with. You know, a good wine gets better with age. Most beer gets shittier with age exponentially, and especially if it's not handled properly. You know, if it gets warm, no bueno. If it gets light struck, no bueno. So that's why I think cans are a superior package to glass every day of the week. They don't let any light in. Light is the biggest beer spoiler in the world, which is why Heineken tastes like skunk's ass. You know, there's a classic example of light struck beer, and so it's what light struck tastes like because they put it in that green bottle, and it's kind of become, you know, to define the style or the brand. You know, it's just become identified with Heineken, but it's technically flawed beer. You know, so maybe you don't know, but that's what it's from. It's green.
There's a lot of stuff I don't know, and that was one of them. I just had a conversation today about how I don't like Stella out of the bottle as much as I like Stella out of the tap. So I think tap beer is probably the best, right?
Not necessarily. Not if you have the right packaging material and you're, you know, really, really hyper focused on oxygen exclusion, like we try to be. I mean, the fact of the matter is you can't keep oxygen out of beer when you're putting it in a can or a bottle. But we've got the best equipment that money can buy, and it really helps to exclude that oxygen, and that helps extend shelf life. And you know, oxidized beer, everybody's had it, whether you know it or not. If you've ever had a beer and you just said, "Oh God, this is awful," it's probably wasn't when it was fresh. It's probably just oxidized. You know.
One of the other questions I have, what's on your schedule for seasonals? Do you have anything?
Right. Well, so COVID has kind of messed that up. It would usually this time of year we do Pompeii's Pilsner, but because of supply chain issues, we can't get the ingredients in time to get it here because it's made out of all imported ingredients, German malts, and it also takes a hell of a long time to make. We lager that beer for close to 2 months. And because of our supply chain shortages, we just aren't going to have time to get it to the market. So we're going to stick with Merriweather, which is our other West Coast IPA, through this seasonal, and then we're going to be launching a hazy in a can in June, I believe, Dania.
Yeah, and middle to end of June.
Middle to end of June. I just saw the preliminary artwork for that beer today. It's looking pretty cool, so I'm excited about that one.
All right. I don't know, you've been as entertaining as anybody I've ever had on the Zoom, and we've had like 22, so or 23.
Thanks for that. I'm really passionate about beer.
Yeah, it comes across, and you're funny, and I love the accent.
No. Well, just to close out here, we really, really appreciate all the support. Lewis and Clark would not be where it's at without people specifically here in Montana. I mean, Daniel may know, but a staggering percentage of our beer never leaves the state. Even
Yeah.
though our distribution footprint does, most of it is right here. And it's really, really humbling just to see how much support we get from folks here in Montana.
Yeah, it's been
And
fun. Thank you.
it's not unnoticed, and we really, really appreciate it.
To add to that, I wanted to put a big thank you out there to all of the Bud guys and ladies.
Oh, nice.
We appreciate everything you do for us. So this is 24 ounces and it's ice cold.
Sure.
I do love a good
Yes,
red belly
thank you.
from time to time.
So tomorrow night we have, sorry guys, thank you. And Tara is going to send out an email, but they gave us lots of swag. We have like a hat, or like 4 hats. We have a really nice vest, and you guys don't get this because I already wore it. All right, give it away. And we have a couple of mugs that we will fill for free once we get open again, and we'll definitely have a Lewis and Clark beer on. So and Tara will do a blind drawing tonight. But I really want that vest, Tara, so don't make it that blind. It's fine.
One more thing to add, Mark.
Hey, Mark. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to
Mark,
say
if
that
you would like.
we're
You're
doing the Zoom thing. Go ahead.
Oh, Mark, I don't think that vest is your size.
No.
Oh, really?
So if you would like one, let me know.
Because I gained 10 pounds over this
Yeah,
whole.
no biggie. I have.
Thanks for noticing. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't mean
No,
to
because
cut.
I learned your size when I sent you that shirt.
All right, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to point out that I'm on my wife's computer, so my name is actually not Magdalena. I just realized that that's the way it's showing up. My name is Mike, and I'm at the brewery almost every day. So if you guys are ever in, just ask for me. I'm happy to answer any questions or just visit, have a beer.
So much fun. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yeah. So Tara will do the drawing, and then I'm going to talk about tomorrow night. So tomorrow night is Saturday. That's the Red Lodge Brewing Company. And my first question, I think Max missed my first question. I was trying to be funny about how'd you come up with the name with Lewis and Clark. And apparently it wasn't that funny. But tomorrow night, my first question is is there actually a Red Lodge in Red Lodge? So, you always have to have something prepared. And so that's my one for tomorrow night.
You already
So,
gave it away.
yeah, so you guys will all know, but they don't know. I haven't asked. Well, maybe I hope they're not on. Oh, that'll be horrible.
Amanda's on there. I see her.
No.
I see her
Amanda.
face. Hi, Amanda.
I'm not gonna say that, Amanda. I take it back. Anyway, so we'll have fun tomorrow night again, and hope you guys sign up for our wine tasting next week. Although I really kind of want to do a beer tasting again because these guys are way more fun than us serious wine people. So cheers to everybody.
All right, cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for
All
having
right.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Great job.